What's up, Squadron 7? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to Star Wars Theory's newest video, Not My Luke Skywalker, a love letter to the sequels. Before I get started, the reason I wanted to make this video is because there are a lot of big voices out there who are not necessarily perpetuating, but enabling the hatred of the sequels and kind of minimizing the voice of those who love them. Now, they're not doing this directly or they're not doing this intentionally, but given the fact there are so many huge YouTubers out there who are, detractors of the sequels, I feel like the voices of the few, or the voices of the many in my case, who love the sequels are relegated to the comment section, and they don't have a voice to stand up for their points of view, or they don't have a voice to argue their points of view. And so I'm going to react to all of the points, hopefully, that he makes or outlines in this video, and give my hot take on them. So let's get started.
The entire galaxy knew Vader was a bastard. They knew he was a murderer, a tyrant, planet killer, and a monster to say the least. Despite knowing all this from just the films itself, let alone Legends, where Luke learns so much more about the evil that truly was Darth Vader when he was alive and after he was dead, he was still the only person in the entire galaxy to see the good in his father, and to try to focus on that and bring it back out of him, despite everything and everyone thinking otherwise. Mark Hamill said it best.
So, okay. My point of view on this particular argument is that seeing the good in his father came easy to him. Luke never witnessed any of the atrocities he committed. He wasn't there to see Vader slaughter younglings. He wasn't there to see Vader choke Padme. He wasn't there to see Vader plunge the galaxy into darkness. Seeing the good in a father he's always heard stories about, over the evil that he had never bore witness to, comes easy to him. But we have to remember the dark side tendencies that Luke showed in Return of the Jedi, cutting down his father and cutting off his hand in a fit of rage until he finally stopped. Luke didn't engage Vader as a pacifist. Hell, Luke almost struck down Palpatine in anger as well, if it wasn't for Anakin stopping him. And I say Anakin because at that point he was showing signs of being Anakin again. The light was seeping through. And to me it makes sense, because immediately afterwards Luke says, "I see the good in you."
Your thoughts betray you, Father. I feel the good in you. The conflict.
There is no conflict.
20, 30 years? And come on, that's a little bit overindulgent in my...
And he'd never leave his sister behind like that. It's just not something he would do.
Okay. At this point, Mark Hamill's statements came during the press junket of The Last Jedi, and these quotes are often cited as justifications for hate. But what is often left out of these videos, or what is often left out of these citations, are the context, of course, and the surrounding footage of Mark Hamill proceeding to admit he was wrong after watching the whole movie put together. Because it's not all about him. It's not about just Luke. In an effort to rebuild the Jedi Order, in following the traditions, he had lost his nephew, Ben. This was his Obi-Wan losing Anakin. It plunged him into exile. But it was more than just losing Ben. It was the startling realization that trying to rebuild the Jedi Order of old was what caused it. It had caused him to react prematurely to visions of a future that he didn't want to come true. This is what causes Luke Skywalker to cite the Jedi Order's failures to suppress Darth Sidious and the creation of Darth Vader. It's why I love The Last Jedi so much.
Now that they're extinct, the Jedi are romanticized, deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out. It was a Jedi Master who was responsible for the training and creation of Darth Vader.
Aside from deep lore about the Prime Jedi and balance in the Force, it gave us a multi-dimensional Luke who not only had flaws and failures, but a Luke that gave us our first film that put into context a lot of what we witnessed in the prequels. Because no film had ever tried to confront that story, that failure, the hubris of the Jedi Order. The Last Jedi did that.
After a traumatic event. Eventually, they do, and it's a heroic story that you can relate to. The Rocky Saga are some of my all-time favorite movies. But what I fail to realize is, what is it realistic to? Realistic to a common fallacy where to become old is to become bitter?
No. Essentially, what it comes down to is, in spite of this heroic and legendary status in the galaxy, he had failed. And that tremendous expectation would lead the best of us to carry a heavier burden of failure. The burden of the chosen one, who in failure fell to the dark side and plunged the galaxy into darkness. The burden of the legendary Luke Skywalker, who had redeemed his father despite all of the evil he had done, who saved the galaxy, who in failure exiled himself because of this.
I failed. Because I was Luke Skywalker. A legend.
In Secrets of the Jedi, it was ultimately his conclusion that the Jedi needed to end, and that he had caused so much suffering that the galaxy was better off without him. Of course, he comes to the conclusion after Yoda speaks to him at the end of The Last Jedi that he was wrong.
To throw his dad's lightsaber over a cliff and spend over 2 hours being a depressed old hermit, only to redeem himself by literally dying. Literally, if you think about it, that was the whole point of the film. Remember what Luke Skywalker did for us. He died. Let his death not be in vain. All of this was because he tried to kill his little nephew, his Padawan, in his sleep. None of the film was hopeful.
Okay, so that's probably a Mandela Effect, because that was actually the version of events twisted by Snoke/Palpatine that Ben saw. In the actual version of events, Luke, yes, ignites his lightsaber. But he immediately regretted the thought, and just like in Return of the Jedi, he recoiled and stopped himself. Only the circumstances led to Ben seeing the twisted version of Luke trying to kill him, and thus led to Ben's fall.
Luke coming back as a force projection at the end and inspiring the rebellion so they could go on and spread the courageous deed that they saw that day was super heroic. I detest that it wasn't. I would say it was the most docile and potentially lame thing Luke Skywalker could have done.
Okay. I will have to respectfully disagree with this point. It was heroic. It was Luke Skywalker. In fact, this was the outcome I had anticipated, because at the end of the day, whether you wanted an epic fight or showdown, you cannot deny that Luke saved the Resistance in the most Jedi way possible. Non-violently. Now we can go back and forth about whether or not it would be better in the movies to see Luke Skywalker disabling AT-ATs or taking down Star Destroyers, or even disabling Kylo Ren in an act of, heroism in that sense. And if you think about his arc in The Last Jedi, it makes sense, because he starts off as a person who is jaded about the hubris of the Jedi Order and his own hubris for trying to train Ben and losing Ben in the way that the Jedi Order had failed Anakin in the prequels, to a person who had finally realized that it wasn't the Jedi that needed to end, it was the Jedi, or the idea of the Jedi of the old, that needed to end. And that's what led him to the conclusion that he needed to confront Ben in the way he didn't confront him back when he lost him, non-violently.
Why not just be there? The X-Wing didn't work? Come on, he had the X-Wing that he raised in the 9th film, which makes no sense as to why he just didn't go with Rey anyways.
Okay, I thought Star Wars Theory read the novelization, but I guess he didn't. It seems a bit nitpicky. The X-Wing, in fact, didn't work. I'll put the quote on the screen just so you can read it.
Why not subdue Kylo in front of the First Order like that? He could have done one of two things. He could have either put Kylo to sleep, obviously not killing him in front of everyone, that's not the Jedi way, or he could have immobilized all the AT-M6 walkers in front of them.
Okay, again, I contend, while people like to see Luke destroy Star Destroyers and see awesome feats, Luke confronting Kylo Ren with zero violence was the most Jedi thing he could have done, especially given his arc of seeing the hubris of the Jedi Order, and of course his arc of seeing his mistake in trying to confront Ben that way in the past.
Who would have still believed in hope and all that stuff that we saw in Return of the Jedi, only for him to then change and then retcon that again in 9 by saying, and I quote, "I was wrong. It was fear that kept me here." So he doesn't understand that in a decade of staying on the island, but then understands it in about a year of being a Force ghost.
Oh, okay. It's not a retcon. This is a continuation of his arc from The Last Jedi. He didn't go from jaded and disgruntled to "I was wrong" just like that in over a span of year, as you say in the video. He had learned a very valuable lesson with Yoda. Yoda burned the Unity tree. Yoda had given him a lesson on letting the past go, even going as far as agreeing with him that it was time to let the Jedi end, or the idea of the Jedi of the past. This was an incredible scene in The Last Jedi, because after all these years, Yoda had not stopped teaching.
The Jedi Order to end.
Time it is. for you to look past a pile of old books, Skywalker. Still looking to the horizon. Here, now. The need in front of your nose.
I was weak. Unwise.
Lost Ben Solo, you did. Lose Rey, we must not. Heeded my words not, did you? Pass on what you have learned. Strength, mastery, but weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all. The greatest teacher, failure is. We are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters.
The greatest teacher of success failure is teaching Luke to be in the moment and to overcome his fear of what could be, fear of the future. This was his arc in The Last Jedi, and it was in this lesson that Luke finally realized what he had to do. And then he force projected halfway across the galaxy, saved the Resistance non-violently, and gave his life selflessly for it. And in that very moment, he heard Obi-Wan again. Let go, Luke. He learned his lesson. He was wrong. So no, it's not a retcon. It's a continuation. So this is a stark minimalization of the complexity of Luke's character. To say that he goes from, the Jedi need to end to I was wrong in the span of a year in the Nether is to ignore completely quite a few minutes of dialogue with Yoda and Luke from the movie. So it begs to question that sometimes I think most people who formulate these arguments against the sequels to support their confirmation bias with Luke and the notion, not my Luke, is that they are often ignoring parts of the film, maybe not intentionally, but definitely missing it, in their attempt to find what was wrong with Luke. They had failed to grasp the story behind what made Luke Luke.
You wait 40 years to see his true powers in the Force, as when we left him in 6, he was but the learner. And now, he's the Grandmaster. As Mark Hamill said, he expected to have Force lightning coming out of his ears at this point. If you're going to take the entire character and do a 180...
Mark Hamill also said that it would have been boring to see an old benevolent Jedi Master Luke. I think it's time we stopped using Mark Hamill as a megaphone for our opinions.
And if they were, well then they got a really funny way of showing it. We had 40 years of an understanding of Luke being one type of guy. Then he was this sad hermit who didn't care about anything and threw his dad's lightsaber off a cliff. It's like knowing your best friend for 40 years, then you see him the next day and they're a completely different person. I understand the writers were different and didn't communicate much with one another, as so the rumors go. Because I even heard episode 8 script was finished by the time episode 7 was in theaters.
Okay. First point, the last time he saw this lightsaber was on Bespin and he lost a hand, just saying. And as a fan of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and hero's return, I never really expected this one type of guy. I expected a mature, a seasoned old Luke who had gone through some horrible experiences, and he had. We're so fixated on this fact that it wasn't planned, and we're going on the internet looking for scripts and unfinished scripts and unreleased scripts and Snyder cuts and JJ cuts and all of these things to kind of, ease the pain. But I think this is just not the way to go as a moviegoer. I'll touch on this a little bit more later on, I guess.
Like Luke did? And then Luke reaching out to grab it and say a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect? Luke literally was suffering from having a personality disorder in these films. One moment he's all for this, the next he's singing a completely different tune.
I can't really follow here. It was a direct continuation of his arc. And while that line of dialogue might have been a jab at The Last Jedi, I don't see it as a personality disorder. And again, a very taut minimization of the character. We're forgetting the lesson Yoda taught him. We are what they grow beyond.
Which I still don't think he ever would do that. He would talk to him. You know how many times Luke talked to Vader to try to get him to turn back to the light, say, "Father, I sense the good in you," reminding him of who Anakin Skywalker was.
Okay, again, Luke didn't try to kill his nephew, okay? That was a twisted version. He never really went for the kill. He ignited his saber and immediately knew he was wrong and regretted the thought.
I saw darkness. I'd sensed it building in him. I'd seen it in moments during his training. And I looked inside. And it was beyond what I ever imagined. He would bring destruction and pain and death at the end of everything I love because of what he will become. And for the briefest moment of pure instinct, I thought I could stop it. It was like a fleeting shadow. And I was left with shame. And with consequence.
Also, let's try for a minute to empathize with Rey's situation, because a lot of people don't. They minimize it, they minimize the internal struggle and mental struggle of a person contending with her own darkness, the idea that her parents sold her to protect her, the idea of having killed Chewie and learning that she was descended from the most powerful and most evil Sith Lord in all of the galaxy, and on top of that, she had just got done fighting a version of her dark self. She was frightened of the future, herself. Having just gone through this with Yoda about confronting his fear and being in the moment and accepting the moment in front of you, Luke passes on the lesson. Confronting your fears is the destiny of all Jedi. This all happened in the span of a little over a year, and people are upset that she didn't lose a hand. I mean, let's dispel the notion of time here and just accept that Rey was burdened with a microcosm of problems, mental problems that not a lot of people relate to. Of course, I would argue not a lot of people can relate to losing a hand either, but, you know, it's not always about physical hurt or physical loss. It's you know, mental struggle is a very real issue. And when people say she doesn't have any flaws, you know, that's my argument.
Rey's reason for giving up was that she believed her thoughts that she'd become evil. Luke gave up because he believed his thoughts that Ben would become evil, and to stop that from happening, he needed to kill him in his sleep. Whereas younger Luke, who was amid...
All right. We keep on making this argument now. Mandela Effect. He thought he needed to stop Ben, but he realized his mistake. But it was too late, he was never going through with it, and quite frankly, we are forgetting that Rey makes the same arguments that he's making in this video right now.
But you saw there was conflict inside him. You believed that he wasn't gone, that he could be turned.
And I became a legend.
And Luke addresses it right then and there.
My nephew, with that mighty Skywalker blood, and in my hubris, I thought I could train him, I could pass on my strengths. Leia trusted me with her son.
Are we not paying attention to dialogue now in favor of simmering in the hatred of the content?
Still didn't say that he needed to kill him to rid the galaxy of this evil. He, mid-anger, after quote-unquote defeating his father, who was merely toying with him, I believe, and just kind of trying to get him to turn to the dark side, remembered who he was as a Jedi, threw his weapon aside in the face of the Emperor, and declared death if his father wouldn't turn.
Okay, so we're at the point of admitting that there is an inherent darkness in Luke that caused him to lash out in anger and almost strike down Palpatine, but we're disregarding this portion of his character in favor of the hopeful side. Yin and Yang do not cancel one or the other out. They coexist and balance each other out. Mace Windu made a career out of balancing the inner darkness within him. Luke's actions after his fight with Vader and throwing his lightsaber away in ROTJ do not inherently eliminate this part of him. And so I caution a lot of people who hold this stance to think critically about what it means to completely disregard this character trait in favor of the one that is consistent with your confirmation bias. It's the classic trope of the ego and superego. You cannot deny one and live healthily with just the other. They have to coexist in balance.
This is why apparently Mark Hamill had so many conversations with Rian Johnson, saying that he fundamentally disagrees with everything that he's done with his character.
And I told Brian this, it's no surprise. I said, I just fundamentally disagree with your concept of this character.
Okay, stop citing Mark Hamill. We need to, as fans, let them have their opinions professionally and stop citing them as justification for hatred. You know, he even said in one of these videos, oh, I regret saying all that because now the internet's going to cite my video as justification for hatred. And I mean, please show the rest of the footage of him in this particular clip, because immediately afterwards he said he was wrong after seeing the whole movie.
And let it shine through the darkness, finding a flaw and possibility that his nephew might turn to the dark side because of Snoke's brainwashing, and then taking that thought that he manifested of Ben turning into Vader and running with it was the very thing that pushed Ben to become Kylo indefinitely.
Again, I say, knowing is different from witnessing. I like to compare Luke losing Ben to Obi-Wan losing Anakin. Obi-Wan witnessed the slaughter of the younglings. He was there to see him choke Padme. And at the end of the day, he too was convinced that Anakin needed to be stopped. he left him to die on Mustafar.
Seeing that green lightsaber about to slice him in half, he would 100% never trust his uncle again.
Okay, and so we keep on clinging to this notion that Luke would never have killed his nephew or tried to kill his nephew, and you're right, he didn't. He had thought of it, just like he thought about killing his father back then, but he stopped himself. And this particular clip is the twisted dark side version. It never happened.
To have Luke turn into this from who he was really crushing. This for me is why Mark Hamill said that he pretended he was playing someone else, that it wasn't his Luke Skywalker.
For me, it wasn't crushing. It was a stark reminder that Luke was human. He had fears, he had failures, and because the galaxy had held him in such high esteem, his one true failure of losing Ben plunged him into exile. And I hate to say it, but the more you say, not my Luke Skywalker, or Luke would have never done this, is quite literally proving his point. It's an allegory for how the galaxy perceives Luke Skywalker over how he perceives himself. He had failed his sister, his friend, his nephew, failed in rebuilding the Jedi Order, lost his Padawans in the face of a galaxy who holds him in such high esteem. This would be devastating. And as the lament of "this isn't Luke, Luke would never do this" echoes in our living rooms in protest, this is exactly why he is who he is in The Last Jedi. A galaxy that says Luke Skywalker couldn't possibly fail, and an audience that echoes the same sentiment.
This is why I can't see The Last Jedi as canon in my mind, because it was written by someone who didn't do their Star Wars homework.
Last Jedi just, to me, felt like a movie made by a guy who hadn't quite done his homework.
Ooh. This is going places I didn't think it was going to go. This is hashtag gatekeeper territory. Okay, first of all, this is disrespectful. Rian Johnson arguably made one of the most intelligent movies of the sequel trilogy, bringing to light the failings of the Jedi Order and the prequels, confronting that side of the story, and really saving the prequels in my mind. RJ is a huge Star Wars fan, and while I won't laud him as some type of hero, he knew his Star Wars. And it's painful for me to see people attribute such a gatekeeping mentality to him, as if to say he's not a real fan or he didn't do his homework. I disagree with Sam Witwer here, respectfully. He knows his stuff, but I know my stuff too, but that's the point. Knowing Star Wars is one thing. Interpreting Star Wars is another. It's hugely subjective, and everyone has different takes on it. Take Sam Witwer and put him in a writer's room with a bunch of hardcore Star Wars fans of EU and Legends and all kinds of Star Wars lore fanatics, and each person will have their own unique version of which story beats need to be hit and which character developments are a priority, and quite frankly, their own story they want to tell. This is the bane of all writers: consensus. And in the Star Wars universe, everyone's Star Wars story is vastly different to the person next to them. So if you've made it this far into my reaction, I applaud you and I respect you for not completely dismissing an opinion that completely diverges from your own. Many people have asked me on TikTok and other social media why The Last Jedi is ranked below Empire Strikes Back for me. This is practically why. And while I have my own criticisms of the sequel movies, none of the movies are perfect. I have largely enjoyed the stories they told. More so because of the novels, which doesn't erase my criticisms of the movies, but my criticisms of the movies largely have to do with pacing. Editing, scenes that were cut that should have been left, some acts that could have been cut and weren't cut, but it didn't get in the way of my enjoyment of the story. Understanding the story that they were trying to tell instead of trying to impose the story I wanted to see is ultimately what gave me peace. Seeing certain movies as canon or not canon is practically you saying, this is not the story I wanted. And as much as I respect Star Wars theory, it is childish. We don't go into the movies to see a story that we've written in our heads. It's the story that the filmmaker wants to write, and you can make all these arguments about writing Star Wars should be about not your story but our story. But who's our story? Who are you trying to write for? And you can argue all day that Rian Johnson made the mistake of writing for himself, but who else is he going to write for? There is no single metric of Star Wars fan to write for. He'd write The Last Jedi to appease you, appease Sam Witwer, and then alienate the others who enjoyed it. This is the bane of all filmmakers, of all screenwriters. You cannot universally please the entire audience. Again, you can argue, yes, he should have written our Star Wars story and not his, but again, I will argue, what is our Star Wars? Because I loved The Last Jedi, you hated it, and that's perfectly fine, but this is like empirical evidence that you cannot write for one single person and get it right. And I think that's why Rian Johnson said all those years ago that he would like a film that completely divides the fan base, because it proves that there is a stark contrast and dichotomy with how people view material. As someone who quite literally grew up on and with Star Wars, I felt this perspective needed to be on display, because the common argument you'll hear is that OG fans hate the sequels. On the contrary, while I have my issues with them, I do not hate them. They are canon. I'm reminded so heavily of the time where the prequels were under fire. A time that caused George Lucas to sell off the franchise in the first place. A time where now fans are having buyer's remorse. They pushed Lucas out of the franchise and are now clamoring for his return. And don't take it from me, I'm not the one who created the meme. No one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. That meme existed way before the sequels. And so this is the prequel era all over again. People are hating on the prequels, they don't want it to be canon. They loved Legends or EU at the time more than the prequels, and they wanted EU to be the main continuity, but it never was, just so you know. And there are prequel defenders out there, prequel haters out there, and this is history repeating itself. The prequels are largely put on a pedestal now because the sequels, their new kid on the block, is getting all the hate. And so I don't know for sure whether or not in time we will all start to appreciate the sequels like we do the prequels, but I mean, even though I've always appreciated the prequels, it's tough, man. It's tough seeing YouTube channels, big YouTube channels, who are of this opinion. And I know it's their opinion, and I respect their perspective and opinion. But it's hard when you like the sequels, and there's barely any voices out there who will give you a voice, who will give you a megaphone of your own. And I suppose that's why I did this video. Because at the end of the day, it's just like the title of this video. Not my Luke Skywalker. Well, that was my Luke Skywalker. And I guess, if we can come to an agreement at all about anything, you and I, is that we have very different takes on Star Wars, and that's okay. And that's the truth, because again, as you say, Rian Johnson wrote for his story, and he didn't write for our story. I would argue there is no our story. It's my story, it's your story, it's his take, it's that guy's take, it's someone else's take completely. Everyone is going to have a different view on this. But in any case, that'll do it for my reaction to Star Wars Theories is Not My Luke Skywalker, a love letter to the sequels. I hope you enjoyed it, or in any case, I hope you respect my point of view as much as I respected his point of view. Yeah, if you learned something, if this was valuable to you in learning why I loved The Last Jedi, or if this opened you up in any way to seeing The Last Jedi in a new light, hit the like button. Hit the like button if you enjoyed my reaction. Hit the like button if you agree with me. Hit the like button if you respect different opinions. And of course, you can find me on TikTok at @element7_, where I answer a lot of Star Wars questions for fans who are new or fans who are old, who just have these burning questions that they've had in their minds for their whole lives, and new fans who aren't necessarily, indoctrinated, or I say indoctrinated, but ingrained in the lore and the story of the universe thus far. And I answer all of their questions. So you can find me on TikTok if you are there. Otherwise, guys, have a great weekend, and may the Force be with you.